Fray Martín de Rada's expertise in astronomy and mathematics earned him a place among the various missionaries and conquistadors who arrived in the Philippines in 1565 to conquer the islands for Spain. As a witness to and participant in the first 2 decades of colonial rule in the Philippines, and as one of the first to describe China for Spanish readers, Radha's experiences and observations give particular insight into a key period of our history. The only surviving portrait of Martín de Rada reflects his role as a scientist, showing him with his books and geographical and astronomical instruments. It was for this role that he was selected to accompany Miguel Lopez de Legazpi's expedition, establishing a Spanish colony in the Philippine Islands in 1565. Over his 12 years spent in the Philippines, he also took on the role of a missionary, an author, and a critical observer of the plight of the native Filipinos. Perhaps his most prominent role was as a diplomat, due to his thorough account of his ambassadorial mission to China in 1575. In Martín de Rada, 1533 to 1578, scientist, missionary, and Spanish Philippine diplomat to China, sinologist and professor Dolors Folch lays out the scope of Radha's life and work. Published in a Spanish edition as well as an English translated edition, this book is the first release under Vibal Foundation's Colección Iberoasia imprint.
Martín de Rada is an outstanding representative of the Renaissance humanism approach to missionary work. Radha was involved in the Salamanca school with its humanist and critical approach to the Spanish conquests. He maintained a lifelong correspondence with its visible leader in Mexico, Fray Alonso de la Vera Cruz, who was also his superior in the Augustinian order. Radha took from Veracruz his cultural baggage. The trunk of classical scientific books that he took with him to the Philippines fits well with Veracruz's efforts to set up scientific and humanistic libraries in the new territories. Radha's lives in the Philippines testifies of the 16th century strong confrontations of the Spanish colonial administration with the religious orders arriving to the colony. Radha's denunciation of the Spanish military and landlords' abuses in the Philippines are a constant in his letters to the highest civil and religious authorities in Mexico and Spain, and are especially detailed and virulent in his correspondence with his superior, Fray Alonso de la Vera Cruz, who was doing the same in Mexico.
Martín de Rada gave a very detailed account of China based on his first-hand experience and the Chinese books he gathered there. This was at a time when Spain was still considering the possibility of invading China, and in fact, part of Spain's interest in the Philippines was as a stepping stone to China. Thus, there was a great interest in learning about the country's wealth and resources, as well as its geography and study capabilities, and Martín de Rada was able to furnish this information.
The first chapter deals with Radha's youth and early years, as well as his family background. Martín de Rada was born in Pamplona, Navarre, on 20 June 1533, into an influential noble family. When he was 17, he left for Salamanca to study. At the age of 21, he entered the convent of San Agustin de Salamanca, where he was ordained on 21 November 1554. Chapter 2 details Radha's 6 years in Mexico and the influence of his mentor and superior, Fray Alonso de la Vera Cruz. Vera Cruz was a prominent figure in the Spanish establishment in Mexico, who became provincial of the Augustinians in 1557, the year Radha arrived in the country. The third chapter deals with the expedition of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi to the Philippines, with celebrated navigator Andrés de Urdaneta. On 9 February 1564, Urdaneta selected 5 Augustinians to accompany the expedition, including Martín de Rada. Due to Spain's ongoing demarcation dispute with Portugal, it was essential to clearly set the acquired positions. Radha's scientific and mathematical knowledge was therefore crucial to the expedition. Chapter 4 takes a look at some of the books and materials Radha would have packed in his trunk for the expedition. These would have included religious texts, as well as travel books such as the account of Venetian traveler Marco Polo. But most of his trunk was taken up by scientific books, geometry of Euclid and Archimedes, astronomy of Ptolemy and Copernicus, and many more. Chapter 5 goes over Radha's years in Cebu after his arrival with Legazpi's expedition in 1565. Once Urdaneta left to chart the return route to Spain, Radha was one of only 3 Augustinian priests who remained in Cebu with Legazpi and his men. One report from Radha, addressed to the Viceroy of Mexico and dated 8 July 1569, represents the ideas and attitudes that he would display throughout his time in the Philippines. He complained that the Spaniards were devastating the native population and leaving them impoverished. He also declared that the main value of the islands to Spain was to facilitate the relationship with or conquest of China. Chapter 6 is about the settling of Manila by Radha and other Augustinian missionaries after Legazpi established it as the colony's capital in 1571. In May 1572, Radha was elected provincial in Manila and made his residence there, where he remained for 3 years. The 7th chapter gives an account of Chinese pirate Limahong's attempted invasion of Manila in 1574. When the pirates were unable to breach the city's defenses, Limahong and his fleet entrenched themselves in Pangasinan. A few months later, a Chinese imperial junk arrived, seeking to bring Limahong back alive or dead. The Chinese commander offered to take Spaniards as envoys from Manila to explain the situation to the Fujian authorities. Governor Guido de Levezares decided to send Martín de Rada along with Jerónimo Marin and 2 soldiers, Miguel de Luarca and Pedro Sarmiento. The 8th chapter deals with Radha's expedition to Ming-era China in 1575. Radha and his companions were impressed with the sight of crowded streets full of shops and businesses, signaling a prosperous society. Upon their arrival in Quanzhou, they were told that they must kowtow or bow low in the presence of the governor of the province. Although the soldiers saw this as demeaning to the dignity of Spain, Radha insisted that it would be foolish to refuse when they were there to negotiate. Radha returned to Manila in October 1575 with over 100 Chinese books and a wealth of valuable geographical and nautical information. Chapter 9 discusses how Radha was the first to use Chinese sources as the basis for his writing on China. These sources would have included maps and almanacs of China, most likely obtained and interpreted with the help of the Chinese Sangli community in Manila. Chapter 10 is about Radha's significant purchase of books while he was in China, which was not accomplished easily as the Chinese authorities tried to prevent it. Radha noted the role of books in Chinese society, where they were widely available and affordable and covered all aspects of life. He bought basic books with descriptions of the provinces, the population, natural resources, and the military. Chapter 11 is about Martín de Rada's Relación, or account of his experiences in China. The first part of the account details what Radha and his companions experienced during their journey in China, their stay in Fujian, and return to Manila. The second is a brief description of China, divided into 12 chapters. Both parts were used as reference by authors from the 16th century onward. The 12th chapter concerns the complicated relationship Radha had with the native people of the Philippines during his 12-year stay in the country. Radha was a staunch critic of Legazpi as well as succeeding governors Lavizares and Sande, due to the many abuses committed during the process of colonization. However, Radha's systematic reporting and condemning of the unjust treatment of the native Filipinos did not imply that he had a high opinion of them as a people. His writings on their society and customs displayed his negative and disdainful views of them. The closing chapter examines the final years of Martín de Rada's life. He had become discouraged and bitter after his efforts to go to China a second time met in failure. In 1578, a reluctant Radha was ordered by Governor Sande to go on an expedition to Borneo to take geographical coordinates certifying Spain's right to conquer the island. Many of the Spaniards fell ill in the forests of Borneo, and during the return voyage, Radha himself was infected. He died on board the ship in June of 1578 at the age of 45 and was buried at sea. As for Radha's other known works and writings, which include a book on Philippine navigation and geography, as well as linguistic books, no surviving copies have been found.
Martín de Rada is in every aspect a highly honorable figure in world history, and he is no doubt someone to be taken into account for a sensible approach to the complex reality of the European encounters with the New Worlds.
By learning about Martín de Rada, we are able to learn about multiplicity of perspectives on Spanish colonialism that existed in the 16th century. There were, of course, different motives for colonizing the Philippines, whether for wealth and resources or for spreading Christianity. Martín de Rada, with his missionary and humanist perspective, was very critical of the colonial administration in the country, which he saw as mismanaged and abusive toward the native people. His views, as expressed in his writings, gave us an insight into the complex situation in those times.
Martín de Rada died before he could make a return visit to China. Today, we know him from his writing. His account of his experiences and findings in China prefigure the systematic efforts of the Jesuits later to understand Chinese culture and language. His letters criticizing the administration of the Philippine colony and condemning the abuses to which the natives were subjected illustrate many of the tensions and contradictions that would characterize Spain's colonial efforts over the centuries to follow.